For all the games that I've played, the titles in the Fable series have eluded me throughout my childhood. Partially because growing up, the prospects of high fantasy just didn't interest me as much as science fiction did. But also because every time I talked to someone about the Fable series, I would hear mixed to negative things about it just as much as I heard positive things. And for that reason, I always found myself kind of staying away from it. Years later, now that I understand more about the video game industry, and now that the remnants of Lionhead Studios have re-released an HD version of the original Fable, complete with redesigned maps and inventory screens to make the game slightly more palatable to the modern world, I find myself having the opportunity to check it out. Now, a bit of context should be given here, lest I end up on the wrong side of one of the countless Facebook arguments I've had where a person plays Mass Effect 3 in the year 2014 and then goes on Facebook and makes a status that says something like, "Oh, I didn't understand what the big deal was. Why were people so angry about it?" Well, yeah, of course you don't understand because you didn't follow the fucking developer's cycle. You didn't pay $250 for the entire series and merchandise and DLC, and then when the third game came out and it failed to deliver on even a conceptual level, you weren't called entitled by the game industry's media sphere anytime you tried to call the developer out for their bullshit. So let me clarify. I didn't play Fable when it came out, and I didn't follow Peter Molyneux's now pretty infamous hype train. For those who don't know, Peter Molyneux is the creative director for the Fable series. Molyneux used to head Bullfrog Productions, a company which created such legendary titles as Dungeon Keeper, Theme Park, Populous, and Syndicate. Shortly after EA bought out Bullfrog Productions with the express purpose of ruining everything that people liked about them, Molyneux left the company and founded Lionhead Studios with Microsoft, where he immediately began working on the Fable series.
You'll be super powered up on these buttons. You'll be able to use those weapons extremely well.
And while Molyneux was working on the Fable series, he had a tendency to, get excited. And not even in a typical, hey, this game is going to be great, look forward to it kind of way either. More in like a manic, crazed, this is going to be the best game you've ever experienced in your entire lives, and all other digital experiences will feel pale and hollow in comparison. Not unlike that Junji Ito manga with the crazy honey jar and the Whomping Willow. Oh, and by the way, let me now list off a bunch of features that we are currently in prototype testing stages on, as though they are the essential concrete parts of the title.
What we did with the combat, the first thing that we did with the combat, and the most important thing is we got someone called Josh Atkins, who was, is a world expert on combat.
This habit was so ubiquitous throughout the series' development cycle that when you go to Google and type in Peter Molyneux, Google Instant's first reaction is to pop up with the phrase, "Peter Molyneux lies." And to be honest, yeah, Peter Molyneux's got some problems. I mean, it's not as bad as, say, Mass Effect 3! Since Molyneux was usually always apologetic about the faults of each game he came out with, and about the features that ended up not being implemented in each title. But he certainly did have a tendency to exaggerate.
I loved that. Bizarrely, that is about power. So we've got this ability to touch things, touch objects and touch people. The way you touch them is context sensitive. So if you're just meeting someone, you pull the trigger, you reach out your hand, you shake their hand. If you gain their trust, you can keep a hold of their hand and you can lead them. If you have a romantic connection with them, you walk along holding hands together. If that person you're leading suddenly gets fearful, you'll find that you're not leading anymore, that you're dragging them. It's all about holding and hugging and caressing and chastising and beating and dragging. And that's what touch gives you. And I think when you see it for the first time, which I've been showing, you kind of get it.
The general consensus within the game-playing public has mostly been that Molyneux is, for lack of a better word, a dreamer. He has ideas in his head for revolutionizing the way we interact with the medium, and is smart enough to see those ideas through, but consequently, he lives during a time in which technology simply isn't advanced enough for him to make an original Xbox title, in which you hit a tree with a sword, causing the acorn in the tree to fall to the ground, and causing that acorn to eventually sprout into a beautiful tree. So going forward with this review, understand that when the game originally came out, there was a lot of reasonably understandable anger towards it, because it simply didn't follow through on so many of the things that Peter Molyneux mentioned the game would contain during the development process. Also, I should mention that since I didn't play the original game, not only can I not really judge it based off of those factors, one sec. But I really can't compare the Anniversary Edition to the original titles, since I didn't play it back when it first came out. So I will be judging it purely based off of its own merits and outside of those outside factors. I was going to write... This is a bit of a real moment, because, see, the joke was I was going to blow up the balloon, and then I was going to use this marker right here to draw the fact that the point system was going to be 154 points this week, and now it's gone, and I only had one condom. I do have a lubricated one, but I think that would be gross. Involving any of those outside factors. Just one second. God, it's all over my hands. As we did last week, we're going to be using a base score of 100. Now, as we did last week, we're going to be using a base score of 154 points, but we're going to be starting with a medium of 79 points and plus-minusing from there. Let's get started. Fable is a title that seeks to do things different from the traditional RPG. And honestly, my interest in it comes decidedly not from a gameplay perspective, but from the fact that it attempts to do so many things differently from other RPG titles. Rather than the primary focus of the game's storytelling being a traditional hero's journey, the main storyline kind of takes a back seat to give room for what I call personal storytelling. The traditional storyline is still there, in which a child's village is massacred, his father's murdered, and his sister and mother abducted, setting him off on a journey to become a hero and rescue them and blah blah blah. But honestly, that's not what I'm going to be talking about here, because it's clearly not what the big focus of Fable is. Just know that the actual primary storyline of the game exists, and while it isn't offensively bad in any stretch of the term, it's reasonably commonplace. Where Fable shines is the giant amount of leeway it gives for environmental interacting through atypical means for mainstream video games. Also, before I get to the actual interesting bit, let me briefly talk about the game's combat, because I really should. Playing the game even for a few minutes, you will quickly realize that combat was never really meant to be the primary focus of the game. While it is by no means unenjoyable, quite the opposite actually, especially considering how many options it gives you to upgrade, the combat is, at its core, simplistic. The game gives you options and teaches you during tutorials how to block and parry, but this never really came in handy during my playthrough, especially during the late game fights where enemies are larger than you and have abilities which blocking serves no purpose against. If you're going for melee, you just run up to enemies, hit them until you turn purple, and then do a flourish, which is an unblockable, slightly stronger attack, and you continue doing that until they die. If you're doing ranged, you just lock onto an enemy and then back up as you fire shot after shot as quickly as possible. Switching between melee and ranged in the middle of combat is possible, but it forces you to go through an animation where the character puts away their current weapon and pulls out the other one, which leaves you open to attack. Magic, on the other hand, can be used along with whatever kind of combat you're doing. And magic is fun. In addition, with the massive amount of freedom they give you to develop your character, the magic system is very easy to break. Personally, I developed my Force Push spell as early as possible in the game, which meant that I'd go into battle, start attacking a single enemy, and anytime another enemy got even remotely close to me, I'd just use Force Push and send everyone sprawling backward. I hesitate to call this a bad thing, though, because honestly, I appreciate it. I like it when games give me the option to be overpowered as hell. One obnoxious thing, though, I have to admit, is that knocking over enemies causes them to be immune to sword damage for a limited time until they stand back up. Sometimes you can do a finishing move on them, but that only happens when they get knocked out, and I never really was able to figure out exactly what knocks people out. This is especially bothersome during the heat of combat with a bunch of enemies surrounding you, because you'll have to wait the precious few seconds for them to regain their composure before you can finish pummeling them. The thing I have to talk about, though, is the targeting system, because it is a little bit more than pretty terrible. Holding the left trigger targets... Well, see, I hesitate to finish this sentence because in a normal game, the way to finish that sentence would be targets the enemy. Not in Fable, though. In Fable, pushing the left trigger makes the character target whatever particular person the fucking game decides to target. Sometimes it'll be the guy directly in front of you. Sometimes it will be the guy that is directly behind you. Sometimes it will be a friendly NPC that is fighting on your side, who you would have no reason to target. Even better, sometimes you'll be attacking an enemy without the targeting system on, and then push the trigger button to target them as you are attacking them, and the game will decide for some strange fucking reason that the thing it should target is not the enemy directly in front of you, but the guy on the other side of the battlefield. You're supposed to be able to switch between targets with the right stick, but that doesn't work very well, and you usually have to hit the actual stick several times before it even does anything. Also, clicking the left stick enters you into stealth mode, which makes you move slowly and makes you unable to use your weapons. And if you accidentally push down hard on the stick in the middle of a tough battle, you will enter stealth mode, and you won't realize it until you attempt to swing your sword and find yourself doing nothing, and you will take damage and reset your combo meter because of it. Really, really obnoxious. But enough about combat. In the end, it's simply that. Combat. It's not the most polished, but it's serviceable. Let's talk about the true meat and potatoes of the game. The world. The game's world is built upon the foundation of being affected by your actions as the protagonist. This is most noticeable in the actual changing of how the protagonist looks himself. Based off of whether you choose to pursue good or evil quests and options in your playthrough, your character will reflect this, with good characters gaining halos over their heads and butterflies fluttering around their bodies, and evil characters gaining devil horns on their head and flies. Along with this, both item usage and your character's stat development affect how you look. Eating a lot of meat will cause you to get fat. Increasing your physique will cause you to gain muscle. Increasing your skill will cause you to grow taller, although I'm not really totally sure how that logic works. And upgrading your spells to higher levels will cause blue runes to sprout up all over your skin. The effect is that your character inevitably starts to look very different at the end of the game from how they did when you first started. And this is cool. It reminds you how far you came and what choices you made over the course of your adventure. The world's NPCs are a bunch of chatty Cathy's, and will make damn sure to let you know what they think of you anytime you pass them. Every NPC has a relationship meter to you, which can be affected positively or negatively through giving them gifts or interacting with them using expressions, which are quick little animations where you do things like do a flamenco dance, belch, fart, strike a sexy pose, flirt, etc. You can give them gifts, give them alcohol to get them drunk, tell them to follow you, and, of course, murder them without reserve, if that's your type of thing. Every town you enter in the game has houses that you can purchase, and once you purchase a house, which the game refers to as a marital home, you are then free to marry almost any man or woman of your choosing. Alternatively, if you're not the type of gamer to sleep with an Asuka body pillow and use a Nico Robin boob mousepad, you can not get married and instead buy out all these marital homes, upgrade them, and then rent them out to the other couples to earn money over time. And this is where we start getting into the whole shape the world you see fit business, because the extent to which you can break the whole system is hilariously amazing. For example, I'm in the town of Oakvale, my character's hometown. There's one house that I can purchase and rent out, or live in, and all the other homes are occupied by people. I'm fairly well renowned in the game's world at this point, so people trust me. And when I go up to an NPC that's occupying a house and tell them to follow me, they listen and do so. So once I get an NPC to follow me, I can take them outside of the town and then tell them to wait there in another part of the game's map, and they won't return to their home. So once I do this to all of the house's occupants, they are no longer considered residents of the town, and bam! Now I have an empty house that I can buy, and I can do this to every house in Oakvale. And soon, I am a real estate mogul, and everyone is paying me to live in houses that I stole. And the entire game is like this. I can gimp the world's economy to work out in my favor as well. Buy out all the emeralds in Oakvale and then sell them back to the guy at an increased price. The point being, there is so much within Fable that is non-essential. If you play the game and only focus on the campaign mode, you'll blast through it in like 5 to 6 hours. But if you take your time and really get lost within the multitude of distractions that the game offers, I think you will find it highly rewarding. Any book that you find within the game's world can be brought to a school teacher in Bowerstone, who will then read it to the children. You can skip these scenes since really he just kind of reiterates what you could have already read yourself in the item screen, but it's a cool little way of letting you feel like you're actually having an effect on the people around you. Another cool little thing is the title system. There are 2 title vendors in the game who essentially sell names, which NPCs will refer to you as. This is... Sorry, my mic fell. This is awesome, especially since most games don't have a comparable system, and instead opt to give you one singular name or, awkwardly, just never have the NPCs refer to the protagonist by his actual name. But not in Fable. In Fable, you can name yourself Druid, Hood, Avatar, Saber, Arseface, Chicken Chaser, and a bunch of other stuff. And not only will NPCs scream your name in delight or fear, depending on what kind of player you are, the names will be said during cutscenes, too, which is really impressive.
Okay. Looking over this, it looks like we're going to have a final score of 120 points. It's a pretty good... It's a pretty good score. Let's go write it on the board. On the wall. What the fuck are you people doing here?
What do you mean by you people?
Well, it's the next day, and I didn't post anything last night because I didn't like being intruded upon. But I want to get it. It's Sunday. It's Sunday afternoon, and I want to get it done now. And I think they're still there. But
Shitty numbers. Really shitty. The worst possible numbers.
I have to shave because my face is really gross right now. I'm going to put it right here, the picture, not my hair. Are you going to sit there and ruin my shot? Is that what you're going to do?
Fucking wonderful. Yeah.
You don't even live here.
I want to be a part of. I actually do. I pay rent. This couch is my bedroom.
That fucking tape. I've been running out of free time since I started making these videos. It's like the weekend comes and you make the video that's going to be turned in on Thursday, and you have class on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. You have Wednesday free, but then Wednesday is the day that I usually work because I need money, because I don't know what I'm going to fucking do after this semester ends. I know I'm going to Albany, but I don't know how John Moody and I are going to raise enough fucking money to sustain ourselves. I don't need... What? Why did I go to college? This is all I want to do.